What's going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast. I am Dan Malin, back from a 2-week hiatus of sorts. One was because work was chaotic. The other was because I was on vacation. But many thanks to Ed Rouse for covering me the last couple weeks for Talladega and the Roval. But as always, I am joined by our NASCAR DFS expert, our FSWA three-time NASCAR Writer of the Year, Matt Selz. Matt, how you doing? We are in the round of 8, 4 races left, and we kick it off with Vegas.
I am doing better than some in the NASCAR community. Let's put it that way. We'll touch on news here shortly, but I'm doing well. We got 4 races left of this slog of a 2024 season, and that includes getting a bigger break than we normally get thanks to the Olympics. But we get down to the meat of what I feel like is the meat of the playoffs here with these last 4 races. They are all tracks where they are basically in the driver's control, right? Because you've got Vegas this week, Homestead the following week, Martinsville to make the round, the championship race, and then you got Phoenix. So we're kind of done with the mass chaos.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll see.
I mean, each of the first 2 rounds had a drafting track and a road course, and that's
Correct.
just a very stupid layout.
Yeah, it's not great. Was it a good race poll from Jeff Gluck for the Roval was not didn't go well. Let's put it that way. A lot of people want to see the oval back for the second Charlotte date.
Sure.
Especially since the first oval race this year was shortened by rain to the point where Kyle Larson didn't actually get to race it, thus handing Tyler Reddick the regular season title by I think 1 point. Because if Larson had gotten any points in the Coke 600, he would have won the regular season title. And then you had pure chaos happen at the Roval. Obviously, the Xfinity race was a disaster with the caution and the white flag not being taken and costing a guy a shot at his probably only Xfinity Series win ever.
And he's already announced that he's no longer doing full-time racing. I think he enjoys broadcasting a little bit more. So it would have been a nice send-off for him just to have him in there, because he didn't even have any wins with Big Machine Racing during his short tenure there. So yeah, it kind of sucks for Kligerman.
Yeah, it really definitely did, and the explanations from NASCAR make no sense. You're at the track, you can't see a car buried under a tire barrier for I could understand if it was the oval and you missed it and they turn the 1.5 mile oval in less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I get it. But to have literally half a road course and not notice it when literally everybody else on the planet noticed, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
And then in the Cup race, Alex Bowman appears to lose a chunk of his car going over one of the turtles. And it hits, I don't know whose car it hit because Logano and McDowell had very similar paint schemes, but it clearly hits one of their cars because it's a yellow and red car. He goes over a turtle, something shoots out the back of his car, and it clearly audibly hits the grill of one of those cars. And then he gets DQ'd for being light on weight, and the team doesn't even fight it. It's just a weird, which, by the way, moves him out of the round of 8 and puts Logano back in the round of 8. So just a weird wackadoodle weekend for NASCAR at the Roval yet again.
But we do turn our attention this week at least to Vegas, as you alluded to at the top. This is a more predictable track. The second time they raced here, Kyle Larson's pretty much dominated the last 2 races here. But before we get into that, I apologize because I just realized I kind of glossed over the big charter news that kind of swept the NASCAR community yesterday.
Yeah, the legal case is getting dirty. Let's put it that way. I think a lot of the fans are excited to maybe see NASCAR's books a bit because there's been a lot of questions about the financials behind NASCAR, and teams keep bringing up we need more money, and NASCAR says no, you get enough, and then the early crack at the books is shown They don't get that much money, man. The teams are like Daytona makes up, I think it said the purse for Daytona was like 20% of the purse for the entire year. I think is what it said just in that one race. That's how big that one race is. But then NASCAR, after being sued federally for antitrust violations and monopoly, acts in the way you would expect a monopoly to act, and basically says, "Yeah, in response to your suit, we're just preparing to go through the 2025 season with 32 chartered teams. Basically, Front Row Motorsports and 2311, we're not recognizing you have charters. You've essentially lost that because you didn't sign them in time." Um, and so they're basically saying, "Nah, you don't want to play with us? Then fine. We'll act the way that you're suing us for being a monopoly and tell you you can't participate because there's nothing else you can do about it." First of all, I think 2311 will be fine. They clearly have the money and backing to outlast this. I'm a little concerned about Front Row because they are one of the smaller teams. It's odd that they said that the SHR charters that those teams bought will still count, but the other ones that they had won't. That's a weird thing too. So there's a lot to come out. I think the next hearing date I saw was November 4th, which happens to be my birthday. So yay, happy birthday to me. We get dirt on NASCAR. But that's just a weird way of doing business, isn't it? Like we're gonna sue you for being threatening, and then we're gonna threaten you. I I don't understand it at all, to be honest. We appear to have lost Malin. Okay, he's back. We got some technical.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm on my like personal computer and this thing sucks. So I'm like just kind of limping along for the last couple podcasts.
We'll we'll be all right. We'll get it
Yeah.
taken care of. But yeah, so for those concerned that you won't see, Tyler Reddick or Bubba Wallace or the front row guys on the track next year, you will. They'll have to qualify on speed each week. Right now, they're not guaranteed a spot in every race as of right now. So we'll see. But yeah, do we want to talk about actual on-track stuff now?
Let's do that before my computer completely craps the bed on us, and we will do our absolute best.
Yeah, so we've got Vegas this week. We've talked about this before. Where are you counting Vegas as a tire wear track now?
With each passing race, I consider it more of a tire wear track just because I think it was repaved, and we touch on this almost every Vegas podcast, but I think it was repaved not 20 years, but probably closer like 17, 18 years ago. It's had a lot of, races run on it. It is an older surface. So I do think that there's a little bit of wear that we need to account for. I don't think it's high, but I would say medium to high.
Yeah. Also, it sits in a desert, and when the wind blows, it blows sand. And I don't know if we know the concept of sandpaper, but blowing sand on asphalt basically wears it down as well. So while we don't have the weather to worry about with, say, like a Kansas or a Michigan, which are hard winters and whatever, we do have basically blowing sandpaper. It's wearing down the track. It's also a track position track.
Yeah.
Like it tends to be reasonably hard to pass at Vegas. And to illuminate that, if we go back to 2020, that's basically 10 races ago. Only once has a driver won from outside the top 10. That was Alex Bowman, who won from 13th. Who knows? Maybe he'll win just to spite NASCAR's ruling last week. But that's the only one outside the top 10 that has won in the last 10 races here. And the last 4 have been won all by guys starting inside the top 5.
Yeah, and even to kind of, I guess, expand upon the track position aspect of this, there are some value play guys every week where we can find a nugget or two before they even get on the track. But, we don't really get that this week. There's always going to be like some value plays that are sneaky good road course racers. There are always going to be cheap value guys that we know are going to start in the back at a drafting track that can move their way up into the top 20, top 15. This kind of track is tough because this really does come down to, having the best equipment, having the right setup. The lower funded teams, those value plays that we're going to see on DraftKings and FanDuel, they're not going to have so much of an edge for a race like this, just going into practice and qualifying. So it is a little harder. We're recording this Thursday afternoon before we've even seen on-track activity. So it is a little bit harder to try and guess as to who our value plays are. I have two guys in mind, but even then I'm still not completely sold, and we'll get to them later on. But, we can easily identify, the top guys that we expect to do well in the intermediates. Those are going to be your guys that did well at Vegas earlier this year, Kansas, Charlotte to an extent. Probably, I'm not going to throw in Kansas or Texas, but, we can also look at Darlington, maybe even Michigan. So, there are the guys that did well there that you should expect to show up with speed here. But in terms of, the low to mid tier and just the value plays, it gets a little greasy when we're trying to preview a race like this.
It does. And to give you an idea of what give an example of what you're talking about, if we go back to the first race here this year, JJ Yeley moved up 3 spots. He started 37th, finished 34th. You know why? Because Chris Buescher, Zane Smith, and Bubba Wallace all had issues. All of them finished, started well ahead of Yeley. All of them had issues, including Buescher, who wrecked on lap 27, right? Then the next budget guy or dumpster diving guy we would, see, Kaz Gralla started 32nd, finished 31st, only because Christopher Bell and LaJoy had issues before Gralla. They were a lap down, right? Next guy, Derek Kraus, finished 28th after starting 33rd. Again, he basically passed 2 dudes in Harrison Burton and Austin Cindric, who finished on the lead lap. So it took issues from guys that should have finished ahead of these guys for them to get any semblance of PD. There are, Ryan Preece figured it out. He moved up to 23rd, which is pretty decent. Daniel Hemrick had himself a nice day before Colleague fell apart. But yeah, other than that, basically everybody that's finishing inside the top 25 are all the 25 best like the teams you would expect to be there on a regular basis. Same thing is true if we go back last fall, this race last fall, basically the same thing holds true. BJ McLeod, who was repping, I think, one of the hotels in Vegas on his car, started 31st, finished 31st. And the only reason he didn't finish dead last is because you had Briscoe and Elliott and Ty Gibbs and Hocevar all have issues that kept them laps down, right? Yeah. JJ Yeley, same thing. He outlasted Brendan Poole by a little bit and BJ McLeod by a little bit and the other guys who had issues. So it's the same thing. If you're in a bad car here, it could be a long day in the Vegas desert for you.
Well, I guess if we just preview, go right back to the top of the board for this particular race, South Point 400. Any reason to not believe that Kyle Larson can't go out and just flat out dominate this race like he has the last 2 races at Vegas?
I don't think so. I mean, he's in the as we start to share the driver pool here on DraftKings, Larson's 11-5. He's won here multiple times. In the next gen era, if he hasn't won, I think he's finished second in all of them, if memory serves.
2 years ago he wrecked, but you are correct. In the 4 of the other 5 next year,
second or first.
He's got 2 wins and 2 runner-ups. He's led 314 combined laps in the last 2 races here, with a 146.5 and 148.1 driver rating respectively in each race.
Yeah, and he's started second most of the time too. So for those of you who were a little concerned, like in the post-race interview, he said he was going to Cancun this week, I think, for a wedding or something. And people were like, but it's almost the playoffs. Why are you taking off to make? Dude owns this track, man. Let's. He's going to be very popular to play. He's 11-5. You have to get creative if you want to build around him.
Do you want to know why else Kyle Larson is feeling pretty good about this round? It's not just that he has Vegas on the table.
He has Homestead and
He's got Homestead next week.
Yeah, which, by the way, Hendrick practically owns as well. Like, the who's who of winners, I think, has been nothing but Hendrick guys most of the last 5 races there as well. I'm not concerned about Larson. You know, we talk about this kind of often when we get to this time of year, but this may be the most important race of the playoffs, because winning this race as a playoff driver gives you don't have to care about Homestead.
Yeah.
You don't have to care about Martinsville. You get 2 weeks to prep your car for Phoenix, go over notes, talk about what you would change, talk about, setups, whatnot. You don't, I mean, sure, you want to win each of the races and maybe make your competitors point their way in. But, we've talked about this before, where the guy who wins the first race in the round of 8 generally has, a lead basically before they get to Phoenix, because they've had a couple extra weeks to prep their car and get it as good as possible. I see no reason not to play Kyle Larson, except, of course, if you want to get cute and, just avoid the chalk. That would be the only reason not to play him, right? Is you're just trying to outsmart the field and bank on him having another 35th place finish.
In terms of our secondary dominator that we're looking at, do you prefer Denny Hamlin or William Byron, or is there somebody off the board in this top tier that you feel pretty good about?
I think C. Bell's run here pretty well the last few times in terms of, leading laps. He doesn't always have the best finishes.
Yeah,
he does do a decent job of leading laps. In fact, over the last 5, he's got the 4th most average per race.
Yeah.
And then the other guy who kind of jumps off at me is Ross Chastain.
Because of what he did at Kansas a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely helps, because Kansas is comparable. We're also looking at Michigan a little bit here. We're looking at Charlotte. You can toss Texas a little bit in there, simply because it's a track position type track. But Chastain, since the start of 2022 at Vegas, which is a 5-race sample, has finished 3rd, 2nd, 12th, 5th, 4th, and has led an average of 30.6 laps a race, which is basically right behind William Byron for 3rd in that spot, and has one of the better average run positions in that span, one of the better driver ratings in that span. And in terms of fastest laps, he's right there with William Byron. Everybody's behind Larson because he's got like twice as many as the next guy. But I would say Chastain, not to jump all the way down to the 8,000 range, but Chastain is a really, really interesting guy this week.
I think another thing on that, now that you delivered the analytics, Daniel Suarez got bounced last week, so all Trackhouse really has to race for right now is just wins, and they know that Chastain gives them the best opportunity to win races. I apologize for any noise. I have a new neighbor upstairs that is clearly hanging pictures or something on the wall, so apologize for the hammering.
Yeah, also, by the way, who won Phoenix? Who won the championship Phoenix race last year?
See, that's the thing. It's like, even when Ross is out of the playoffs, he doesn't even care. He will win a playoff race. He will win the championship race, even if he's not winning the championship.
He's the first non-championship driver to win the championship race in the playoff format era.
Yeah, he doesn't care. And I can't blame him. Like, nobody should, like, you just because you're in line to win the championship doesn't mean you're entitled to actually win the race. Like,
correct.
It's still a great payday for the driver and the organization.
Exactly. So I don't see why we wouldn't look at Chastain, because if he could get a race here and just not care about the next 2 and not have to pull the now illegal Martinsville shuffle or whatever the heck they're calling it, then, he's golden. So I would say those 3 dudes, those 4 really, Larson, Byron, Bell, and Chastain are my top 4 picks to be dominators without having seen cars on track as of the recording of this.
I'll even throw Ty Gibbs in there as a bit of a dark horse. There was obviously the news
the new Xfinity owner.
Yeah, the new Xfinity owner of the 54 car. That Taylor Gray is going to be taking over next year, which is pretty awesome.
Not showing the silver spoon much, right? Like somebody tweeted out, Eric Jones wins 2 races in his first 2 years in the 20 car out of Joe Gibbs Racing after his 3rd season.
Yeah.
Ty Gibbs, 0 wins through his first 2 seasons at JGR. What's he get? An Xfinity team.
But I will note that, he looked pretty solid at Vegas earlier in the year. But, grabbed a top 5 there, grabbed a top 5 at the first Arlington race, the second Kansas race, led 74 laps at Charlotte and finished 6th. So my thought process is that maybe the length of the Cup Series schedule has once again just like gotten to him a little bit. It is surprising that he doesn't have a win yet in his 2nd year. If he doesn't get it this year, we're all just going to assume that he gets it next year. We can, bet the over on his implied win total if it's set at 0.5. But overall, I still think Ty Gibbs has some upside at this track. It's probably the least technical of the 4 remaining races. So yeah, I'll take some shots on Ty Gibbs. But I do like the Ross Chastain call. But Gibbs would be, I think, my secondary option for a slightly contrarian dominator in this 8K tier.
Yeah, also Gibbs ran pretty well at Michigan, which is, again, kind of a comp because of the speed you have to carry. And, again, Michigan's, again, kind of a track position, even though it's a 2-mile track, shallower than Vegas. Still, the horsepower and the not passing, he did well. He did well with that. Outside of those guys,
we did kind of gloss over Byron and Hamlin, who haven't won in over like 6 months.
Correct. I would say I like Byron more than Hamlin.
Okay.
I know they both have different motivations, right? Byron has done really well at Vegas. He's also done pretty well in the 20 race sample that I'm comparing it to, which is basically every similar track since 2022 gives you a 20 race sample. The best 2 average finishes in those spans, Denny Hamlin at 9.5, William Byron at 9.9. Chastain, by the way, I think is 3rd at 11.3. But I'm starting to wonder how much the court case and the suit is wearing on Hamlin. Like, I know it's a different, like, it's not Joe Gibbs, right? But it is his ownership of his team. And he basically let it slip that he considers Bubba a teammate after the Roval, because they were talking to him post race, and he said, "Oh, your teammate. Oh no, I'm sorry, your driver." He goes, "Same difference." I'm just starting to wonder if it's starting to wear on him a bit more than Byron, who seems to just be finding. I mean, he's got 3 races with top 3 finishes in a row now.
Yeah, he's got momentum for sure. I would probably lean a little bit heavier on the result at Kansas, and I can't believe DraftKings is just listing it as the Fall Cup Series.
I know it has a sponsor, the Hollywood Casino 400.
Like, my God,
the Hollywood Casino is literally off of turn 2 at the track. You can't give it credit.
Good God.
Yeah, I don't know when they changed it, but it cracks me up every time I see it now. Yeah, I mean, Byron outran Denny there. Obviously, Talladega and the Roval are not comparable. But yeah, I'm starting to wonder if Hamlin is just basically residing to pointing his way in.
Yeah.
So I would probably lean Byron in that conversation.
Out of curiosity, how do you feel about Kyle Busch this week? I know it's been a very bad year. He's probably checked out and already looking forward to next year. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he was looking forward to 2026 when he might be a free agent and can go somewhere else other than RCR. But he had that nice run coming out of the Olympics. Both he and Austin Dillon did. When Dillon won Richmond, Kyle Busch still got top 12, but then he rattled off like 4 straight finishes of 7th or better. But then lately in the playoffs, he hasn't grabbed a single top 10 or top 12 finish. But at the same time, this is his home track, and he does like to put on a show here. Now, granted, he usually puts on a full show for the spring Vegas race where he'll run the Truck Xfinity and the Cup Series race.
Yes.
But you get the sense that he still wants to put on a good show here, regardless of the fact that, there's no truck race. He can't run Xfinity, and he's running a little bit cold of late.
Yeah, I mean, he did finish P26 in the Cup race here earlier this year, but before that, he had several straight top five, let's put it this way: 3 top 5 finishes in the 4 prior races to that. So I don't know if we see him show up with speed, I'm more inclined to play him.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, just going based off of recent showings and vibes around him, I probably lay low on Kyle Busch right now. But again, if he shows up, has nice practice Saturday, I don't even need that great of a qualifying spot. If he just has good practice, I trust him to be able to move up a little bit. And the price isn't killer, so you don't need him to dominate to justify playing him, right? But in that range around him, I'd probably right now rather play Bowman, Gibbs, Chastain, heck, even Blaney in that range.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you, what are you doing with Logano now that he's got a second chance here, basically?
You almost have to think that this is probably his best chance,
right,
to advance to Phoenix, because I think when he won the championship 2 years ago, he locked himself in with a win at Vegas in October 2022, led 32 laps after starting P5, and he won the race. I do find it kind of interesting. He finished second in the first 2 stages, so he actually had a really solid car. But again, that was the first year of the next-gen car, and it seemed like Toyotas were late bloomers that year. They really struggled early on. So, yeah, this seems like it's probably his best bet, but the last couple results here haven't been all that great. Earlier this year, he won the pole, which is great. Actually, he won the pole the last 2 spring races here. Overall, he won this race a couple of years ago. He's won here 3 times in his career, so there is that kind of upside. So I do think that he warrants some exposure, just because I think he even knows that this is probably his best bet. I don't think he really has a good chance at Homestead. I don't really count on him or that team being great at a track like Martinsville. If I'm going to lean on any Penske driver at Martinsville, it might as well be Blaney. So Logano does intrigue me, simply because of the fact that this is probably the race that he knows he needs to win if he wants to qualify for Phoenix.
Yeah, I would say he's got the I don't say momentum, but the extra bounce to his step after thinking he was out of the playoffs and now he's back in it. Now's the time to go out. And
how wild would it be though if he, a week ago on Sunday, or this past Sunday, he thought he was eliminated, and how crazy would it be if just 1 week later and he wins this race and he's he's the only driver qualified for the championship race at Phoenix? That's just insane.
It would be nuts, but then again, we could also blame Kyle Larson skipping the Coke 600 for that, because if he doesn't miss the Coke 600, then Tyler Reddick doesn't get the extra bonus points for being the regular season champ, which is all that floated him through after the Roval. So Reddick would have been out and Logano still would have been safe without Bowman being DQ'd.
Yeah.
So again, it's all back to Larson not showing up for Charlotte. But I'm not playing Truex. He's checked out. He's been checked out for months at this point. But this mid-tier, things get a little interesting.
You're talking about below 7K?
Yeah, kind of below 8K, starting with Kez and Buescher, and
Buescher gives me some intrigue, especially just because he's 7,700. He was 9,100 for the Roval, 8,600 for Talladega. Even at Kansas, a comparable track, to Vegas. He was 8,500, started P25, finished 11th. So he got to value on PD alone. But like, this is a guy who hasn't been a 7K driver since I think the first Talladega race way back in May, so 5 months ago. So this is a really nice discounted price on Chris Buescher, who is kind of like a poor man's Ross Chastain. You could arguably make an argument that Ross Chastain might be a poor man's Chris Buescher because like he could very well go out and win this race.
Yeah. He started well here in the spring race here. Did not end well. He crashed after 27 laps.
Yeah.
But I think if I recall, it was a tire, like a really weird tire issue that he just wore it out too quick. I think. But if you look at, comparable runs throughout the rest of the year, he's been just fine. Obviously finished second by the narrowest margin in history.
Oh,
yeah. Ran okay at the Coke 600. Again, it was rain shortened.
Mm-hmm.
So in the shorter period of time, he moved up 16 spots and put up 15 fastest laps and paid value in basically less than half a race. And so he's run well. I'm not going to hold the 9th place, 37th place finish earlier this year on him because those kind of things happen, and he seems to always be a candidate for PD. So he's kind of the leading guy in this range. I do think Bubba's playable at intermediates because we've seen Toyotas just be remarkably fast at similar tracks. He's also coming off one of his best road course showings like that he's ever had.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's going to kind of take me seeing them on track. I'm not a huge fan of Suarez this week simply because he's now out of the playoffs, so there's really no incentive for them to give him anywhere close to equal treatment as Chastain. He's been okay here. He's not been bad. He's got 3 straight top 16 finishes, but if you're starting only a handful of spots behind that, it's hard to find value there in that.
I will say, like, I alluded to this earlier on, but like, I'm going back to the well with Noah Gragson this week. The first driver under 7K, 6,900. So he's the nice play of the week. But this is also his hometown track. He's a Vegas kid.
Correct.
We kind of hyped up Kyle. I kind of hyped up Kyle Busch for the same reason, even though there's really not much to go off of. But he is going to go manage to find another Cup ride next year, 3rd team in as many years. I still think the kid has some upside. I think he showed some growth and development and some maturation this year. And he was also like, he started P30 in this race in the spring and he finished 6th. And he has plenty of experience here from the Xfinity Series. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to assume that he kind of qualifies between P20 and P25, and I don't think he's going to have a hard time paying off this price tag if he can just get a top 15 finish. And we know the ceiling is higher. Yeah.
I would agree with that. This is his home track. In the last 3 Cup races he's run here, his average finish is 15.7. His average start is 24th.
Mm.
So you've got about 9 spots of built-in PD. That's enough to pay off value. Let's see. His average DK score in those 3 races is 37.5.
Yep.
That's more than 5x at less than 7K. So I'm perfectly fine with that. And then anything below that, we're going to kind of need to see what they look like.
Yeah, even when I did my preview article for Fantrax, I wrote up Eric Jones.
Oh, look at you go.
Like 68, like literally right below Noah Gragson, but potential for top 20. He's not going to – I can't believe that he's going to qualify the car very well. But, this past spring, he started P22, finished 14th in this race 2 years ago. He grabbed a top 10. But that was when Legacy or Petty GMS had a Chevy affiliation. They are now with Toyota. But this year, he was top 20 at Texas, the first Darlington race, Charlotte. Did well in the larger, higher speed intermediates like Pocono and Michigan, where he finished 16th or better in both. So, I wish it was a little bit cheaper. I guess shouldn't be too surprised we're not getting too much of a discount on him. But assuming that he starts outside the top 25 again, I think he has a good chance to be optimal if you have the right two dominators. And, if Eric Jones starts P27th and P27 and finishes 19th, he can crack the optimal at 6,800.
Yeah, I would say so. I do kind of like Ryan Preece only because of what we saw from him in the spring here.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was just announced he has a ride for next year too. I think I saw that there's a rumor that he's getting a ride. And then Carson Hocevar seems to be a guy who can just finish the car where it qualifies on a bunch of different tracks.
He's got momentum. I'll give him that. But granted, he finished 12th at the Roval. It's a road course. Top 15 at Talladega. Whoop-de-doo. But he finished third at Watkins Glen. And then started P32 and finished 16th at Atlanta. Everything else is a little bit more dicey, but
he did finish 15th here in the spring after starting 14th.
Yeah. And even for Michigan, he grabbed a top 10 after starting 11th. And so 6,400 is not a bad price tag. If he can just have one of those races, if he qualifies well, this is a good GPP play that probably comes in at under 10% ownership. If he qualifies between P10 and P15, becomes a little more difficult to play if he's starting in the top 10, like he did for, I think it was Bristol.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with you. I don't hate the play from that perspective because obviously if he starts deeper in the field, he's going to be more popular and you feel more comfortable playing it. But you do have to get a little dicey and a little uncomfortable submitting your lineups. And Hocevar show that, like you said, he can finish it where he starts.
Correct. And one last correction after double checking. Truex actually ran really well at Kansas. He finished third there, racked up 65 DK points. And Vegas has been pretty good to him with finishes between 7th and 9th in the last 5. So he's not fully checked out, but it's going to depend a lot on where he starts because if he's going to finish between 6th and 9th, but he's going to start 10th, then I just don't know where the upside is there. Again, I'd rather have some of the guys starting below him who might have higher upside.
I'm going to assume one of those drivers starting below him that you do not want to play is Jimmy Johnson.
Correct. Correct.
He's terrible.
I mean,
I feel bad saying it, but he can't drive this next year.
Well, I mean, he's fully admitted that the car does not jive with his driving style. He likes to drive it off the right rear, which is exactly the wrong corner to drive this car off of. It gets loose every time you try to do that. He's said multiple times he's only ever really in the car to go and help the team translate what the drivers are saying to the guys who aren't at the track.
Yeah.
To make them better. Would I love as a former Jimmy Johnson fan to see him competitive? Sure. Is it going to happen? No. It's not. Unless for some reason they allow him to drive the previous generation of car compared to everybody else in the next gen, then maybe it would help. But also, he's still learning how to drive a Toyota as opposed to a Chevy, so there's that too.
Anything else you wanted to go over, Matt, or is that pretty much just it? I know coverage this weekend is a little bit different. Matt's going to do we'll have the practice notes and all that fun stuff in the Cup Series playbook, but I will be handling the actual driver portion of the playbook. So you're stuck with me this week for the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series in terms of driver pools.
Yeah, my daughter, my youngest birthday party is exactly during practice and qualifying for Cup. So in an effort to not make people wait for the content while I miss the stuff and then would have to come back and rewatch it and then write stuff, I'm going to cede that part of the playbook to Malin for this week. But yeah, other than that, I'll have best bets out. They'll be out Friday. Projections and rostership will be out Sunday morning. The Cup race, I believe, is at 2 Eastern Sunday.
Was that noon in Vegas?
I think so.
Wow.
I think the race is for some bizarre, because it's not bizarre. They are strategically avoiding the 1 Eastern kickoffs for NFL.
That's probably fair because, yeah, you kind of have to go toe to toe with like the second half games, the second half, so like the 1 o'clock games, and then you're kind of contending with like the early portion of the afternoon window for NFL.
Right.
So from like 4 to 5 o'clock Eastern. At least your finish for this race probably isn't during the witching hour, as Scott Hansen would put it, from Red Zone. So like it's not during high time for NFL that people are going to be taking their eyes off NASCAR and shifting to NFL. But it should be a fun race either way. I'll have it on in some capacity.
Yeah, I'll have that on. There's football all day. Obviously, there's another London game.
Yep.
So we'll see. But yeah, practice and qualifying for Cup is it like 4:30 Eastern Saturday. So we'll see. They'll probably do that stupid single group thing again, which I really dislike. But yeah, so that'll wrap that up, and then we'll be, we got 3 races left after this. See who becomes the 2024 champ. Who knows? This may be the best 8 driver field we've ever had in the round of 8.
Potentially. A couple weeks ago, we were looking at this and thinking, is Daniel Suarez, is Austin Cindric, is Chase Briscoe going to make the round of 8? And luckily, it is. You do feel like it's the 8 best drivers from this year that made it to this round.
When you had Bowman in there, it was the 8 highest. If you take out like the playoff point that boosts it and whatever, and you just go with like the normal point totals. Yeah. When Bowman was in there, it was the 8 highest point scorers for the entire season that have made the round of 8.
It's swapping Logano for Bowman. Isn't
Logano is like 9th or 10th, I think, in the points.
It's not a downgrade by any means.
But everybody who's won multiple races, there are 7 drivers who have won multiple races this year. All 7 made the round of 8. And then you have Chase Elliott, who has the highest average finish of any driver in the field this year, even though he's only won one race. Solid. So you got the 8 people that are supposed to be there, and you could flip a coin between Bowman and Logano in terms of their bona fides to make the round of 8. It worked.
Good field. But Matt, as always, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you. Enjoy your daughter's birthday this weekend. Happy birthday to her. But best of luck to you and to the FA Nation for Vegas this weekend.
Best of luck, FA Nation.